Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Aisha Haynes and I'm the Assistant Director at the CTE. I would like to welcome you all to the webinar, Engage and Excite, Tips for Effective Synchronous Online Learning, led by Tina Marie Devlin, Adjunct Instructor in the Health Promotion, Education, and Behavior Department in the Arnold School of Public Health.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. Well, good afternoon. I'm so glad to be here this afternoon with everyone and just share some of my tips that I have gained and I implement in my synchronous and face-to-face and asynchronous classes. I have been an adjunct instructor in the Arnold School of Public Health. It will be 2 years, fall of this year. I absolutely love it. I love working with students. I love engaging with them, but I also love learning from them as well. And I definitely want to hear from you all. So I want to jump right into this presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. I always like to have a schedule and agenda. This just keeps everything on track. And this is something that I like to do in my class as well when I'm teaching, whether it's face-to-face or synchronous. I like to have a schedule so the students know exactly what to expect during each class session. So you'll see we're going to do two group activities. We're going to discuss some of these engaging and exciting tips, and then some Q&A, open up the floor to complete today's session. So we're going to start off with an activity flowing, and sometimes we just don't want to jump right off into talking about really heavy content related to our discipline. So we're going to do a breakout activity, and we'll spend a few minutes just kind of discussing the question that's on the slide. What keeps you engaged during an online meeting or training? So I want you and your group to discuss what are some strategies, activities, tools that a facilitator, that a trainer puts in place that keeps you focused. All right, looks like everybody is back. Thank you so much for participating. So I'm just going to randomly call on about 1 or 2 groups. We only have 3 groups. So let's start with group 3. And I think this is the group that Erin and Christina, Julia, and Melinda were in. So tell me, what were some of the activities and strategies that keep you all engaged?
We had talked about dynamic format, getting away from just the standard PowerPoint. We had talked about like Jamboard and a couple of different options to kind of switch it up. We talked about, actually then we were talking about having students moving about, and actually how difficult it can be to pay attention when what you're looking at is the faces on screen where the cameras are moving and people are going about their day while engaged. So, but I think the big thing was just some like I said, dynamicy toward the presentation.
Very nice. So dynamic formatting, so kind of getting outside of that standard PowerPoint. And I look like I see some kind of examples of different tools maybe that some of you are already using, whether it's mathematics or other type of courses. So getting outside of kind of the standard and traditional and maybe trying something a little creative, new, innovative. Very good. Okay. Thank you, group 3. All right. Well, let's go to group 1. That was the group with Heidi, Angelina, Morgan, and Natalia. What were some of your strategies, activities, ideas to keep you engaged? Some technical issues. Okay. Oh, hate that happened. Thank you, Angelina and Heidi, for that feedback. Well, what about group 2? Group 2, were y'all able to discuss some of the strategies, activities, things that you'd like to see to keep you engaged in an online meeting or training?
This is Gloria. I head in for our group 2. We talked about using polls, content-based polls, and even polls that are unrelated to course content, and also using open-ended questions to transition into the subject matter. We talked about breakout groups and how you started with an engagement for the participants right off the bat, and so that we don't go and head into the kitchen, for example, and be trying to fix lunch while we're supposed to be in your workshop. And and so there was a post in the chat about poll everywhere in Desma, so we talked about that as well. That was it for our group.
Yes, thank you so much, Gloria, and great examples. You know, like you said, having polls, whether it's content related or not related, just doing a poll, getting students thinking or getting ourselves thinking about stuff, open-ended questions. So starting off kind of getting feedback from students, and also as well having breakout groups, kind of like what we did just now. Start off the class, start off the session training with some type of activity. Yeah. Thank you, Gloria, for that feedback. So yeah, so I did that activity as kind of an example of some things that you all may already be doing, but things that you can maybe start implementing in your class to start off just with some type of activity, whether it's dynamic formats, changing up the formats for your whole class. And I know that in group 3, they kind of talked about moving about and sometimes some of the difficulties when you're doing synchronous type learning and people are on camera and there's maybe different disruptions or things going on. So yeah, so synchronous can kind of come with its own challenges with the technology aspect. But thank y'all for that feedback. Okay, so let's kind of jump into what this workshop is all about. Tips and tools to excite and engage individuals, especially your students, in a synchronous, face-to-face, or asynchronous format. So I currently do an asynchronous class right now, currently, for my health promotion, education, and behavior course, but I have done synchronous teaching, like many of us probably have because of this pandemic, but I've also done face-to-face as well in my almost 2 years of teaching. So I just want to give some practical tips and tools. All right, so the way I'm going to go through these tips is I'm going to start at the top left, and then I'm going to go down from top to bottom and then move from left to right. I think that's how we're looking at it. I think it'll be left to right. So we're going to start off with the first tip and the first strategy that I use is play the name game. Let me tell you, this is so important, and you all may already be doing this, but I get to know my students' names off the bat. I tell them by 1 month into this class, I'm going to know every single person's name. This works really well with face-to-face. That builds a connection with you and the student. I use different techniques to learn their names. One of those being, I create name tents. So have the name tents available that they pick up their name tent when they come in the class, and they can either sit it in front of them in their spot in the lecture room. Another technique that I use is as I'm grading activities or as I'm grading assignments for students, I will have the Blackboard photo roster up and available. So I will go to that student's photo as I'm grading their assignment, and I'll connect their Blackboard photo roster with their assignment and their name on the assignment. Another strategy, a third strategy that I utilize to know their names is as they're coming in the door, especially face-to-face, I will say, tell me your name again, I'm going to learn it. They'll tell me their name. And I may ask that throughout the class. The student raises their hand with the question, I can either see their name tent, or if I don't use name tents, I will say, tell me your name again, and constantly repeating and making that connection. For synchronous learning, as students are entering through Blackboard Collaborate, I will greet every single student with their personal good morning, such and such, and I make sure that I make that connection and greet every single student. The second strategy that I use to get students engaged is the 3 C's. Clear, consistent, continuous communication. Clear, consistent, continuous communication. In my syllabus, I tell the students twice a week, every Sunday, every Wednesday by 6 a.m. Eastern Time, I'm going to send a Blackboard announcement to you. So they know that Sunday and Wednesday at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, they're going to get a Blackboard announcement outlining assignments that are due. maybe some global health facts and news and current events. I may reiterate a point in the syllabus that needs to be repeated. In addition to that announcement that stays posted on Blackboard, I also send the students an email 6 a.m. Sunday and Wednesday with that same announcement content. Something that I do in face-to-face learning, I may also reiterate that same information from the announcement verbally before we start class. Clear, consistent, continuous communication. That makes a difference in ensuring that students understand your expectations, but that also can help minimize the emails and questions they may have for you after class. The third tip is student sharing. This gets students excited. Who doesn't like to talk about themselves, right? Who doesn't like to talk about achievements, accolades, things they're accomplishing? Maybe not everybody, but some of us do. Kind of toot your own horn. So I tell my students in a face-to-face session at the beginning of the semester, if you're involved in some type of on-campus activity, or you've won some prestigious award, or you've gotten into med school or grad school, etc., any type of success or accomplishment, share that with the class. So I have those students at the beginning of class, before we do activities, give a 5-minute update of what they're doing, like, hey, I just got into med school at Johns Hopkins University. I'll be starting in the fall. I've had other students who have shared some of the, like dance marathon. I've had students who are part of the dance marathon committee on campus who want to tell the students, hey, I'm the chair for the dance marathon this year. Can you all get involved in this initiative? I've had other students talk about their study abroad opportunities, or their global health work, mission work that they've done, because it is a global health class that I teach. So I have those students come up and give 5 minutes of what did you learn from that experience in Uganda? Student sharing gets students excited, but it also may help other students think, you know what? I may want to do something like that. Let me connect with a student just to see how maybe I can connect with a study abroad opportunity or the dance marathon. Or maybe I'm thinking about med school, so let me talk to that student who just got accepted. What are the steps for the med school application process? The next tip, we're in the middle column now, the 7-minute rule. And I will tell y'all that these tips are tips that I have just implemented on my own and said, hey, I hope it works. If it doesn't, no one was hurt or harmed, I won't do it again. But a lot of these tips and tools I have modified from the Center for Teaching Excellence, their wonderful resources that they post from some of their workshops that they provide. So I'm using what's evidence-based from CTE and their resources. The 7-minute rule. No one wants to hear their professor or their instructor talk for 50 to 75 minutes. We don't want to hear a trainer talk for that long. So I share for about 7 minutes at a time. And then I break it up and I'll do a review and recall, or I'll do a game, or I'll do a discussion and dialogue, which I'll talk about in a bit. So break up your lecture with some type of interaction engagement. Like Gloria indicated, do a poll, do a breakout, do something that can be quick but can break up that lecture time. The next tip, get going with games. I love games. Many of you may already be using games such as Kahoot, and we're going to actually play a Kahoot during this session for our second activity. I do a Kahoot, whether it's face-to-face or whether it's synchronous, every single class. And those Kahoots are a review of the previous lesson or the previous week's content. Students love it. Let me tell y'all, my students in their end of year or end of term evaluations will say, love the Kahoots. Keep the Kahoots going in your class. And also my Kahoots can also serve as my reviews for my midterms and final exams. So what I do is I create a link in Blackboard that says Kahoots, archived links. So every single Kahoot that we do in class and that we play, I make it accessible to the students in an archived area on Blackboard, so they can go back and keep playing those games. The next one, Wind Down Wednesdays. This is what I'm doing now in an asynchronous format. This is an optional activity. Every Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, my students have an hour just to chat with me and their peers. I make sure that I tell them the disclaimer, this is not a counseling or therapy session. If you're needing something more intensive and more individual or group-based in a therapy aspect, utilize the campus resources or utilize your own private-based resources. But the Wind Down Wednesdays are an opportunity just for us to talk about current global health events. We're in a pandemic. I want my students to know they have a safe, private space where they can talk about this pandemic and how it's upended their college life, their personal life. They've been very successful. I do them every Wednesday. I think how many have I done? I started January 11th, and let me tell you, the students will log on. They're excited. I have an agenda and I have the rules. But this is a time to keep students engaged, but it can excite them. One of my students said, Ms. Devlin, this was fun. Yes, great question. So the Wind Down Wednesdays, I create Blackboard Collaborate sessions. I create a reoccurring Blackboard Collaborate session from January 11th to April 14th is my last one. So they just log into a Blackboard Collaborate and we do the Wind Down Wednesdays that way. Great question. So you would have to set that up initially and make sure you communicate that with the students. These are optional, not mandatory. The next strategy, review and recall. This gets students excited and engaged. This is the Kahoots. But what I do, this also ties into the 7-minute game or the 7-minute rule. I will do a review and recall, whether it's a Kahoot, or I may just stop the class and say, review and recall time. What was the infant mortality rate in Nigeria in 2019? We talked about this last week. Or I may ask that open-ended question like Gloria had mentioned. So tell me, how do y'all feel about that information we just went over right now? Or how did you feel about that discussion that we had last week on ethics in human subjects research? Review and recall. It's a way for them to keep the content fresh in their mind. And great question I think someone had about Wind Down Wednesdays. Those can also serve as your office hours as well. But let students know other students will be joining this session. So anything that's private grade related, they don't want to share in the Wind Down Wednesday time frame. But Wind Down Wednesdays can actually serve as office hours, especially if students may have the same type of questions. They can ask those questions during that Wind Down Wednesday. And that's what I'm doing in an asynchronous type of environment. For my face-to-face and synchronous, I set aside separate office hours for those. And then lastly, discussions and dialogues. This is just an opportunity just to get your students talking about current events or events relevant to your content or discipline. Some of my class sessions that I do, I may set aside 15 minutes before class where we're going to do a discussions and dialogues. I may post a question, kind of like what I did for you all in the breakout. And I have my students just give me their input and feedback on this topic, and you can make it relevant to your discipline. There are some topics in my global health class that generate a lot of discussion, let me tell you. So I may set aside a good chunk of a class period just to discuss and dialogue. Let me hear from you. Let's just have an open discussion. So these are my 8 tips to engage and excite students in a face-to-face, synchronous or asynchronous environment. Asynchronous is a little harder, but I tried to implement the Wind Down Wednesdays as one of the tools to get them engaged and excited. Any questions? I got 3 minutes for this section. Any questions from participants on these tips? Great question. The average attendance rate. So it varies. It's usually between 5 and 6, and I have 125 students this term. This is my first time doing this in the asynchronous type of learning environment. So it's about 5 to 6 on average every Wednesday, and they're usually the same students who come back every week because they like that connection that they have with me and their peers. Great question. And it's optional, so students, because it is optional, they know it's not mandatory, they may be less likely to attend. And also, if you follow the 3 C's, their questions may already be answered from your clear, consistent, continuous communication. So they may not need that space. Great question. Other questions on these tips? Great question, Julia. So I really tried to be succinct and use a lot of bullets. And so my announcements, if there's not an assignment coming up, they may be 3 bullets, like 1 sentence. Dr. Haynes has seen my announcements because she really provides great consulting with my class. But if there's an assignment due, there may be 6 bullets, and each bullet may be about 2 sentences apiece. But I try to use clear headings and underline things. So I may say, due tonight, and I'll put the content. Upcoming activity, the content. Midterm exam, the content. So I try to, yeah, you're exactly right, Julia. They won't read them if they're long. So I do bullets and really clear headings and try to be concise with my announcements and emails. Great questions. Okay, well, let's go right on ahead to, and we can actually continue this discussion during the Q&A, but let's go to activity number 2. And this is going to be Kahoot. I think we may have everybody. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and start. And let me know what you all see. There's a countdown clock, and the first question is going to appear. It's a quiz question, and it's timed. The first question, integrating games and open discussion into the lecture every 7 minutes is called. And you see the responses and hit the color in the response that's correct. Very good. And you can modify the timer in Kahoot, by the way. The timer is actually a very short timer just for time's sake, but the 7-minute rule, very good. And this is a review of what we just went over in the 8 tips to engage and excite. So we're going to get let's see who's in the lead. AC, Natalia, and M are in the lead. Very good. Correct responses. Let's go to the next question. It's only 3 questions. Question number 2. My students love these. Oh my gosh. Discussing current events and other topics, the first 10 minutes of class is called student sharing, get going with games, discussions and dialogues, or the 3 C's. Very good. Discussions and dialogues. Very good. And I may have said when I was giving my tips and tools, the first 15 minutes of class and not exactly 10 minutes, but this is discussions and dialogues, just having open conversations before class starts with the students. Very good. M has moved up in the lead, the leaderboard. So let's go to the last question. Clear, consistent, and continuous communication is called the 3 C's, wind down Wednesdays, review and recall, play the name game. Very good, the 3 C's. All right. And then that's the end of the Kahoot, and you can add as many questions as you like every week. So Natalia, I think, is in bronze, AC is silver, and gold is, who is the winner? M, awesome. All right, so for those of you who have utilized Kahoot, what do your students think about it? Casey, yes, they do. Everybody loves Kahoot, absolutely. Yep, your students enjoy them? Yes, yes. Oh, yes, oh, yes, they do, Julia. Oh, my students, they will, you can hear the grunts, no, on. I'm like, okay, calm down. Oh, good. Thank you, LaRonda. So for those of you who have never really experienced Kahoot or do not use them, what was your impression of this little sample a few moments ago? Oh, Heidi, okay, awesome, loved it, good, fun. Thank you, Natalia. And I actually took the next step. And one of the great things about Kahoot is that sometimes they will offer kind of pre-made type of Kahoots that you can maybe pull for like different observance days, holidays, things like that. But there's a lot you can do with Kahoot. So Heidi, is it the person who answers first who gets the most points? That's a great question. I know it's the people who answer correctly consistently really rise up in the leaderboard, but it may be based on speed. So I would advise everybody to check out Kahoot. Thank you, Dr. Haynes. Go to Kahoot and just check it out, become acquainted with it. I actually pay for a higher subscription so I can have more features, but I do that because I want to, and I just make that as one of my engagement and excitement tools. So you don't have to pay, you can do the free version, but I do pay to get more features. All right, so Q&A, we've got 10 minutes. I wanted to provide 10 minutes to everyone just to ask some questions, have some discussions and dialogue. So what type of questions do you all have I may be able to answer?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Hi, great presentation, by the way, Tina.
Thank you.
I have a question. So I teach synchronous online, and this is actually my second semester at USC, and I'm teaching synchronous this semester as well. I'm struggling a lot to have students talk during my synchronous online sessions. Maybe like out of 15, only 2 or 3 of them talk. So what strategies or tips you found useful, if you can share?
Oh yes, that that is an issue. It can be. So I definitely find, kind of like I mentioned, when you make that connection with students, when you greet them in the morning, say their names, kind of warm them up a little bit. When you start off sometimes with those discussions and dialogue, it can be hard, especially if you're teaching a morning class, to get them talking. You're always going to have, like you said, 2 to 3 who are going to be your most talkative. But another thing you can do is even maybe have some of your ground rules or rules in place where, and again, this is based on student comfort level. I like to always take that in consideration, where you indicate, everyone needs to try to actively participate in most of the class. It may be you have a participation grade that's incorporated into your synchronous learning, where them participating through Blackboard Collaborate, that's part of their grade. So they need to do some type of engagement. If you do breakout groups, maybe encourage the students, maybe one of the persons in the breakout group could be the reporter, make sure everybody participates. Those of you who may not be comfortable, try to engage with the breakout groups, throughout the semester. So it can be difficult at times getting students to chat and to talk. I don't know if Dr. Haynes or Casey or Gloria, if y'all have any input on getting students to chat in synchronous classes from your CTE experience.
This is Gloria. I have one history instructor who assigns, for the readings, assigns discussion questions. And up front, the instructor let the students know that throughout the semester, he would be calling on students randomly to answer the discussion questions and to the entire group during the class session.
Great point, Gloria. Yeah, some professors, they will tell students, I'm calling you out at random. Yeah. Yes, Casey, absolutely. Question.
Well, I was just going to add to a couple of things. I have an instructor who teaches in the business school, and one of the things that she does is so one of the issues with the synchronous teaching, right, is the top to the void of it all. And so one of the things she does is at the end of class, she does a ticket, an exit ticket, which some people may have heard of for in-person courses, but she does it in the chat. And so she tells her students that before they leave the room, they need to add to the chat their one takeaway or their like one thing from the day. And so if they've been fairly quiet throughout, it can be a really good piece of evidence that they were paying attention, or they at least paid attention to one thing, right? Like engaged with a little piece, and so on their way out, they're like, this wasn't a waste of time, here's a little piece. So even if they're not chatty throughout, that can be helpful. And the other thing that I like to do when I'm doing synchronous sessions like this is to make sure that you, similar to the 7-minute rule, make sure that when you are asking those questions, they're not necessarily open-ended, vague, does anybody have anything to ask, kinds of things, but more purposeful, targeted kinds of questions that will give concrete, open-ended answers in the chat. Or even similar to what Tina mentioned, you said that you do ask more kind of general questions, but I noticed that what your prompt was that you were asking them for how they were feeling about things. So not just have questions, it was more of a specific thing, and it helped with the temperature check, like, am I going too fast and slow? So I love that idea too.
Thank you, Casey, for that feedback. Very helpful on kind of what you do, but also your instructors that you consult with. Absolutely, thank you. And I know that Heidi had asked about, she's never taught synchronous online. Is there a webinar training for it? I'm going to put this to the CTE staff. Are there additional synchronous trainings that Heidi can engage with and get involved with CTE?
I'm looking now. I'm going to paste our events calendar link in the chat. I know that we had one last week, and it should be up on our YouTube channel soon. But all of our events will be on that website, and then I'm also going to link our YouTube channel here as well. There may be some information there, some webinars that we've had in the past on synchronous learning. Yes. And Casey noted that you can do a one-on-one consultation with an instructional designer at CTE.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes, and thank you, Casey. Absolutely, and I'm going to have to give my personal plug to CTE. I'm always going to toot their horn because they're awesome. Definitely collaborate with a CTE, instructional designer. I mean, they are amazing. Dr. Haynes has worked with me extensively in developing my course, and we were just working with one another the other day on how can I, make sure my students are reading things, and how can I change how my modules are structured on Blackboard. So they are awesome. They're very knowledgeable and very experienced. So I highly encourage everybody to utilize CTE resources. And yeah, they've helped me be a better instructor, definitely.